Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Apple no longer sells a large screen iMac. Will they in the future? And if not, what are the alternatives? MACMOST is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 1,000 supporters. Go to MACMOST.com/Patreon. There you could read more about the Patreon campaign, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. So here's what happened last week. Apple introduced the new Mac Studio. This computer is a standalone computer. The screen is separate and it's much more powerful than the Mac Mini. And at the same time, Apple discontinued and stopped selling the 27-inch 5K iMac. Now the only iMac for sale is the 24-inch iMac, which is new and was introduced last year. So this left people wondering, is Apple still going to come out with a larger screen iMac that uses their new Apple Silicon processors? So what was the 27-inch iMac? Well, it was an all-in-one computer that featured a 5K display. That was probably its most prominent feature, as even now 5K displays are hard to come by. Apple's new Mac Studio display is 5K. But outside of that, there's really only one or two decent 5K displays for computers out there. Prices for the 27-inch iMac started at $17.99, but that was for a pretty bare bones one. So if you wanted more power, it cost a lot more money. Matter of fact, it was really easy to configure an iMac for more than $4,000 or even $5,000 if you wanted a higher end processor in it, a decent amount of memory, and a bigger SSD. So I think typically people that bought this were buying something that was at least $2,000, probably more like $3,000. So here's Apple's current lineup of Macs. And the lines here represent from the lowest priced model all the way up to something that had about a 2 terabyte hard drive. And you can see here the 24-inch iMac has quite a bit of a range. The low end for $12.99 is the base model, but you can go way up from there. Now for the desktops, overlapping the iMac on the low end is the Mac Mini. And overlapping it on the high end is the new Mac Studio. So why did Apple discontinue the 27-inch iMac? Well, there are a number of different factors we can look at, and we can only really make educated guesses. Apple doesn't provide sales figures for each individual model of Mac. But we can assume that the 27-inch iMac didn't sell very well. Otherwise, Apple would never discontinue it. Apple was very successful for a long time selling iMacs that were all the same screen size. And we know that in addition to the 27-inch iMac, Apple also had the 27-inch iMac Pro, which most likely didn't sell very well as Apple stopped making it. I've heard some people claim that the 27-inch iMac was very popular, but I couldn't find any actual evidence to back that up. We do know that most people prefer a MacBook model, not a desktop model, and the smaller iMac was probably more appropriate for most home use. In fact, there were probably a lot of people that wished that there was something in between the 21.5-inch screen and the 27-inch screen, which is exactly what Apple has given us now, a 24-inch iMac. Another thing to consider is that even if the 27-inch iMac sold fairly well before, but now that Apple's come out with the Mac Studio, they would expect fewer people to be buying a larger screen iMac. Those pros who can't afford the high-end Mac Pro would naturally gravitate towards the Mac Studio. So I think looking at this chart and trying to predict Apple's strategy, it's clear that they want to return to having the single option for an iMac. And I think this covers most people's home use. For pros, a Mac Mini or Mac Studio or a future Mac Pro at that top end, that will fill everybody's needs. Pros usually like to have more than one screen anyway. So what if you do want to get something as close as you can to the 27-inch iMac? Well, you have three possibilities now. One is to get the 24-inch iMac. This screen isn't that much smaller than the 27-inch iMac, but that still beats a lot of third-party screens that are out there. And it's a pretty nice design, it's pretty lightweight, and it features the new Apple Silicon in it. Another option is to get a Mac Mini. This gives you a really low starting price. You can get a Mac Mini for $699. Chances are you want to spend a little over $1,000 to get one with decent storage and maybe some extra RAM. And then you pair that with a screen of your own choice or the Studio display. Adding a Studio display to a Mac Mini is going to bring you up into the $3,000 price range. So if you're on a budget, what you may want to do is actually get a third-party display. Then you can actually bring the price way down. A base Mac Mini and say a $400 4K display like the ones that I use, that could bring you in at way less than any 27-inch iMac. You won't get the number of pixels on the display that you will with a 5K iMac, but you will get the screen size. So that's a really good budget option. You could also have a Mac Mini with some more memory and a larger drive, and you can get maybe a slightly nicer display, and it brings the price right in line with the low-end 27-inch iMacs. Now the same is true with the Mac Studio. The Mac Studio is much more powerful than the Mac Mini, jumping from the base M1 processor all the way to the M1 Max. But the price goes up to $2,000. So if you want to add a studio display to that, you're talking at least $3,600 for that pair. But you're getting something that's pretty powerful. You can compare that to the old base 27-inch iMac because it's far more powerful than that. You could also do something fairly cheap by getting that $2,000 Mac Studio and pairing it with a $400 4K display. One of the things that people may be concerned about getting either the Mac Mini or an iMac is those only have the M1 processor. There is no M1 Pro option and no M1 Max or M1 Ultra like in the Mac Studio. But the M1 is actually a really good processor. I hear from a lot of people that, oh, they don't want to get the M1 processor because they work with iMovie or they have a lot of photos and things like that. I have a MacBook Pro that has the base M1 processor and only 8 gigs of RAM. And I've used it for Final Cut Pro. I've used it for Xcode. I've used it to export and combine lots of videos and to do lots of heavy work. And it's never been a problem. So I think if you're a professional video editor or you're a professional photographer that needs to process a lot of photos or a developer, then maybe getting one of those higher end Macs is the best bet for you. But for most home users, the M1 processor is all you need. A 24-inch iMac will perform fantastic for you, and a Mac Mini with an M1 will also be great. Now there are 4 M1 processors. The M1, the M1 Pro, the M1 Max, and the M1 Ultra. And a lot of people ask, well, why is there only the M1 available in the Mac Mini and the iMac? Why not an M1 Pro as well? And I think that may be a possibility in the future. Not for the M1, but perhaps for the M2. That the next generation Mac Mini may have an option for the M2 and M2 Pro. And perhaps the next generation iMac may have an option for an M2 Pro as well. But I don't see Apple changing things now. I think their lineup for the M1 processor is pretty set. Now what I'm hearing from a lot of people is they want something slightly different than what Apple's offering. Like they want something in between the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio. Or perhaps in between the iMac and the Mac Studio. And let me tell you that this is something I've always heard. No matter what Apple comes out with, there's always going to be people that want to have something right in between two options that Apple offers. What I always say is there's always going to be room for indecision. Whenever you're faced with choices, you're always going to go and say, oh, you know what would be perfect if it was right here in between these two choices. But the bottom line is these are the models that Apple is offering. So if you're looking for something, you've got to pick from what's available. So if you're on a budget and you want to get an iMac, take a really close look at the 24-inch iMac. It's a decent machine, and if you go into the store and take a look at it, you may find that the 24-inch screen is fine for you. If you want something bigger, you want a bigger screen, but you don't really care about the pixels, then getting a Mac Mini with a 32-inch 4K display is probably a great option. It's going to be a bigger screen than what Apple is offering in the more expensive Studio display, just fewer pixels and options. And if you use your Mac professionally, then you probably want to take a really good look at the Mac Studio. If adding the Studio display to it is going to make it too expensive, then look at third-party displays. But if you get the base model Mac Studio, maybe adding a larger hard drive to it, and then the Studio display, the price is going to be around $4,000. But $4,000 is actually getting you quite a lot, especially with that M1 Max processor. So I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.